Hi, folks. It's Mark here. Just give it a few minutes to get everyone joining. Quick question, though. I got a couple of screens going on here, and everything looks to be showing up correct on one screen, but not in the other. Those of you that are live, can you tell me, is the picture currently showing backwards, or is it looking correct? If you can make a comment in the comment section, that'd be great. Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Wasn't sure. Shows backwards on one of my screens, and I wanted to make sure you could see the writing and read it correctly. So thank you. While we're waiting, just a reminder: this is question and answer session. So please feel free to start placing your questions in the chat. That's if we got questions right off the get-go, I'll get started with your questions. I'm just setting everything up right now so that it streams in the correct places, and then we'll get started. Okay, folks, we are going to get started. We've got a whole bunch of people on the chat this morning, which is fantastic. And I'm going to tell you guys I am using some new technology today, so hopefully everything's going to work fine for us. Reasoning being is I think I reached the end of the capabilities of my old laptop, and it started to do some lagging and such. So if you guys just can let me know, can you see me? Can you hear me? Okay. If you can just let me know if you can see and hear me okay, because like I said, this is it's a brand new laptop, brand new microphone, whole new setup for me, and I've got some new technology that I'm going to be using, so that as you guys ask the questions, I can select them and the question's going to show up on the screen. So hopefully it's pretty good. So I see lots of folks saying you can see and hear me, so that is absolutely fantastic. So we'll dive right in. And as I mentioned, this is a live Q&A, so feel free. Anything on your mind, I will do my best to try and answer. It makes the session better. I do have a page of stuff here that I was probably going to go over, but if I don't touch anything on here, that's fine. And I bet you chances are you're going to ask me a bunch of questions that are going to cover it as well. So I think it'll work out just good. For those of you, just a heads up, if you ask questions at the end of this, I am going to go through and make a note of who asked questions, and then I'm going to pass out some prizes, as I do have a series of prizes in front of me. I've got let's see, I've got two setups here, which are two of my custom hot fish paddles with bait heads. Those are a couple of the prizes I'm gonna give away. I've got one of my custom 11-inch pink with a matching bait head, hot fish bait head. Gonna give that away. I've got some Bite My Herring strips here. Thanks to the folks at Bite My Herring, I can give those away as well. So that's just a few things. I do I gotta find it here. I got a bag of my custom bait heads here. I'm gonna grab 10 of those, and I'm gonna give 10 of those away. So there'll be lots of things to give away. I've also been tying up a bunch of my own flies this week that I just use for myself. I'll give a few of those away. So let's make this really interactive, make it fun, and it'll be good for everybody, hopefully. So what I see lots of people starting to fire some questions in. So I'm going to start working down the list, and let's get started, folks, and keep the chat going. So let's see if the technology is going to work. And wow, the first question I got in is from John, and it's I wouldn't say it's an easy one, but I'll give you my views on it. So John's first question is, if you're fishing in an unfamiliar territory, what's the best way to get on the fish quick? That's a really good question, and I'm gonna give you my opinions, my thoughts on this. The first thing I would say is, and this might sound super easy, but if you're at a boat ramp or if you're at a marina, talk to folks, and get their sense of what's been going on over the last couple of days. I can tell you when we tournament fish and it's not in the marina that I'm out of, we'll absolutely talk to different folks. Now, granted, I probably won't talk to my competitors, because if they do tell me something, it's going to be wrong information. But I'll go to the local boat ramp. So if I'm fishing sometimes in St. Catharines for the King of the Lake tournaments there, the guys in the marina are going to give me a bunch of BS because they're all competing in the tournament. But 5 minutes away, there's the Port Dalhousie ramp. I'll go down to the ramp there and start talking to the guys there, because the recreational guys are great to help each other out. So that'd be one of my first tips. My second tip would be, that's what I'm going to get into more, like what's the environment. My second tip would be looking at the water. Absolutely, I'm a big fan of colored water. So I'd much rather fish like a nice green nutrient water versus a dark black death water kind of thing. So I think looking at the water, do you have any scum lines in the water? Those are absolutely places I would start, because that's where I'd say the bait fish like to hang out, because their food can be there, and therefore the kings or the trout are there. So that'd be one of my first tips. The second tip I would say is look at navionics, and look at see if there's any structure. I think about Toronto, or I think about even Niagara and the Niagara Bar on Lake Ontario. That's structure, and the structure it holds the fish, brings the fish in. You've got often you'll have different temperatures around the structure. So that's another tip I would give you. And then the third piece, and I kind of alluded to it, is try and get a sense of what the water temperatures are like. So there's a various different websites that you can go to get actually water temperature forecasts. There's also a number of weather buoys across the various different Great Lakes. I would look at that information too, to understand what are the temperatures. If you're I use where I'm out of Scarborough Bluffs, just east of downtown Toronto. If you're going to go fish there, and suddenly you leave the marina and you've got 45, 46, even 50 degree surface temp water, you're probably not going to be fishing in the close to port. So then it's really about, well, where is the warm water, and traveling to find that, find that warm water. Typically on the North Shore, when we see the cool water right by the marina, that means we're traveling south towards the U.S. or towards the borderline. And those folks on the South Shore, fishing on the U.S. side, if they've got the cool water by their ports, they're going to be traveling north towards the Canadian side to, they'll probably see that water temperature get warmer and warmer along the way. So thank you, John, for the first question. And just a reminder, folks, keep those questions coming in. And also, if I can ask those of you that are on the channel right now, don't forget to obviously, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, if you can subscribe, that'd be great. But also, if you can like this stream and also share this stream out to your Facebook groups or your social media groups, it'd be great. This will get more people participating in this, and we'll get more questions. And I love answering your questions, and I think you guys love to hear the different things. So let's go look at our next question. Okay, I've got a question from Mike F. Do you use flashers and whirligig spinning glows for early spring Lakers? And if so, what's your leader length for 10-inch paddles? So, Mike, I have done. I won't say it's my go-to for Lakers, but I have used flashers and spinning glows. From a leader length perspective, I don't find Lakers very picky. So like I've done 3 times the flasher, I've done 4 times the flasher, I've done 5 times the flasher, and I've had success. I've had success with Lakers. I don't have it right now with me, but I'll tell you my go-to, and I think Mike, I'm 99% sure you're on the South Shore of Lake Ontario. So my go-to when I used to fish the spring a lot out of Port Dalhousie, my go-to for Lakers there was it was a spoon. Actually, it was a silver spoon with a blue stripe, and I cannot tell you how many Lakers I have caught on that spoon. I think I probably have 5 or 6 of that spoon, because there'd be times where I'd be out and myself and 2 other people, or 3 other people running 6 or 8 rods, and I'd have both riggers would have that spoon dumped right in the mud. I'd have 2 mag divers out running them as close to the bottom with that spoon on, and then I would run weighted steel as close to bottom as I could. Even if I had to clip on snap weights, I would, and I'd have that spoon. Like I'd have it on 6, 8 rods. I find a silver and blue spoon works really, really well for Lakers. But don't get me wrong, the whirligigs and spinning glows will work. I just find I have more success with a spoon. I have also a couple of crankbaits, Rapalas, that are in the same. They're silver and blue, and those worked really well also. So that's my go-to Laker rig. Okay, I got another question here from John. Are there any ways you can maximize your gear to give you the most flexibility when targeting different fish? Yeah, it's a good question, because I think for many of you guys, you do not want to be, maybe you do not want to be like me, and I probably carry 12 to 15 rods on the boat at any given time, and throughout the season I'm taking rods off, bringing rods back, and that's it gets expensive fast, and there's also a lot of rods and reels you got to maintain when it comes to upgrading your drags and keeping things in check. So for me, I'd start by saying, start out with what is the time of year or the location that you fish the most. So when if I go back to 10, 15 years ago, my dad and I, we fished out of Toronto most of the time. So we optimized our gear for fishing that June through call it September time in Toronto. And what that really meant is it was running downriggers with typically a 30 or 40 pound main line on our downrigger rods, wire divers, and then our lead core, call it copper or weighted steel setups. And that was what that would do. And when we think about our lead cores, it was often 5, 7, 10 color lead cores. And when it came to weighted steels, it was probably a 200, a 300, and maybe a 350, and maybe a 250 in between. And that was our optimal. But then the thing is, so now let's say you're getting into spring fishing. Well, in the spring, and I don't care what part of the lake you're on, or which Great Lake you're on, actually, that's when you're targeting fish really shallow. in a lot of cases, they're in the top 10 feet of water. Well, you can go out and buy a whole bunch more rods and a whole bunch more reels, and you can rig them up. Or you can just step back and say, what do I have? So, for example, if you've got downrigger rods, and in the spring, you typically don't use a lot of downriggers. Like, not saying you can't, but you typically don't. Like, when I'm thinking about the spring, I'll run a lot more boards and a lot more, high divers that are only 10 feet down, like my slide divers. So what you can do is you can take that downrigger rod that's got 30 pound on it, and you can tie a leader. You can tie a 20, 30 foot leader of, 10, 12, 14 pound, fluorocarbon. And that, and use that with whether it be your spoons or your crankbaits. So, it's making those rods versatile. Similarly, let's say you want to run a 2-color or a 3-color in the spring. You can, if you've got, again, those same downrigger rods, or if you've got a couple of braid rods, maybe that you use for braid diver, you can tie on a 2-color or a 3-color section for the spring fishing. And then when you're done at the end of spring, you cut it off, you wrap it around an old reel or a water bottle, and you save that for next spring. So that's, I think, how you can. That's a couple ways you can be really maximizing your gear and your rods to be more flexible. The other thing is, and I've got a box of them somewhere behind me here. The other thing is snap weights. If you've got lead cores or a weighted steel, you can run snap weights on them. So what I would say is I've got a couple of rods that are, I do have my favorite weighted steel setups. So that would be my 200, my 250, 300, and 350. Those are my go-to weighted steel setups, but I don't have 3 of each in the boat. I've got 1 of each on the boat, because then what I have is I got a couple of 50 weighted steels, and I got a couple of 100 weighted steels. And then what I can do is I can actually just clip snap weights on, so I can let the weighted steel out. I can let out 100 or 150 feet of the backer, clip whatever snap weight. So typically the rule of thumb with snap weights is every ounce gives you 7 feet down. So if I've got a 100 weighted steel, that's going to get me down about 20 on its own. But if I want to get that down another 300 feet, I've got to figure out what's the ounce of weights I need to get me down there. But that's another tip that I will use to help get me down deeper. So hopefully that helps. That's a great question. Thank you, John. Okay, so we got a question here from Steve Morris, and he's actually talking about the Bite My Herring rigs. So he says, on your Bite My Herring rigs, how do you store the heads so they don't dry out? So Steve, I think you're talking about how whether it be the Bite My Herring or another brand, the soft plastic, called rubber or the silicone, it reacts with some bait heads. And the key word is some bait heads. And I'm going to guess by you asking me that question, Steve, you are probably using a Reese Davis head. That'd be my guess. I'm trying to think what other ones react, but the Reese Davis head does for sure. Here's my tip: don't use Reese Davis heads on those. Myself, I use a hotfish head. They do not react with a hotfish head. I want to say I think it's the diabolical head here. They do not react with a diabolical head, from what I remember. If you do have one, and I'm trying to find it, looking around right now. Here we go. I do have. This is actually a Dreamweaver head right here, and I've left this strip in. This is actually a Soko bait strip, but I haven't taken this out in probably 2 years. It just keeps catching fish, and I leave it in. But why is it not reacting? It will not react with chrome. So if you've got a bait head that's chrome, it won't react regardless of what brand. So if it's a Dreamweaver or it's a Dreamweaver or it's Reese Davis and it's chrome, you won't have a reaction. Unfortunately, if you're running a Reese Davis and you're running their glow head or green or whatever, and you put a soft plastic in, it's gonna melt it. I remember learning the hard way once. Taking a rig out, putting it off to the side, and then forgetting about it in the boat when I had my 17.5-foot Princecraft, and I left the soft plastic strip on a flasher, and it actually melted the Kingfisher flasher, and it was ruined afterwards. So good question. Definitely related to the bait head. Okay. I got a question from John. I hear a lot of people talk about down and outs with riggers. How do you do it and when? So John, it's an interesting question, and I'll be very honest. It's not a term I actually use. My understanding, I think, when people talk about down and outs, The down is actually the downrigger going down deep, and the out is the diver going out from the boat. That's kind of how, when I hear people talk about that terminology, how I think about, the comment of down and outs, John. But it's not really a phrase that I use. But really for me, it's I think about I'm always trying to vision what's going on underneath my boat, or call it behind my boat from a spread perspective. So where are all my different rods related to each other? For me, running a larger charter boat, I will often have probably my minimum set of rods I'll ever have out is 6, if not 8. I can run more. There's been times where I've ran 6 rods on the boards, double divers, which puts me at 10, and then two down. Sorry, yeah, to puts me at 10, and then 2 downriggers, and I've been at 12. It's not something I do every day, especially when I'm on my own. But probably pre-COVID, and if I think about 2019, my father, he's a fully licensed captain with Transport Canada, like I am. He would come out and do it with me, and we would have no problem running more rods. Obviously, if we had the right number of people, because on the Canadian side of Lake Ontario, it's 2 rods per person, and then obviously on the U.S. side, it's 3 rods per person. But that's that. I hope I kind of answered your question, John. I don't use the terminology, but really I think it's about visioning where is your gear out there, and a lot of time downriggers are down deep, and then your outs, your divers that are away from the boat, they might be a little bit higher because they're actually away from the boat, so there's not so much risk of spooking the fish. Okay, great questions so far. Let's keep going. Okay, what else do we have? Okay, 1 second here. Just gotta make sure. What's the one tip from fishing out west that you think Great Lakes fishermen haven't caught onto yet? I like that question, Steve. Thank you for that one. I think they're catching on more and more and more, but I'm gonna say it's running anchovies. Out west, you will not. I'm going to tell you, especially on the Canadian side. So call it Vancouver, BC. But actually, even I know a number of folks fish Oregon and Washington and the Pacific, and it's similar. You will not find strip herring. Like, they don't use it. They've really moved over to anchovy heads. I actually use a lot of Reese Davis heads when it comes to anchovy. I have last year I was playing around with these new ones here too. These are the new Lure Jensen anchovy heads. They seem to work really, really well. I find they're a bit stronger, a bit more robust. They don't have all the colors yet though. So I think I'd like to see how they evolve their color patterns. The Reese Davis head's been out forever, but I'm trying to think if I have a Reese Davis here somewhere behind me. I probably do, but here we go. There's a Reese Davis one I've got. It's a UV one with the red pin. That I think is probably the one tip I would say. Far too few people use anchovies. I've probably been converting a lot of folks on my dock. I talk to, and we come back in and maybe say it was a tough bite, and I'd be like, well, I'm doing quite well, and they're like, what's working? I'm like, it's my anchovies. So that'd be probably one of the tips I would say is, if you haven't fished anchovies, give them a try. Most I can speak for the Canadian side. Most tackle shops you can buy anchovies from, and give them a go. If you've never rigged up an anchovy rig, definitely check out my channel. I do have a video on my channel, so check it out or subscribe. There is a video on actually tying up anchovy rigs and how I recommend doing it. It is a little bit more complex, because with a standard meat rig, you're just you got a strip, you put in the head, you got to obviously make sure it rolls nicely, but then the hook trails behind the strip. With an anchovy, you have to make sure they're brined really, really good. Because you're actually putting a hook in the anchovy. You're actually, you're putting some tension, because you're actually curving the anchovy to get the roll, and you can actually adjust your roll, faster, slower, so on and so forth. So that's probably, I'd say, the number one tip that I would suggest. I love that question, because if I were to think about it the other way, I would say, you know, and I probably don't have too many of my West Coast friends on, especially this time of the morning, but I would love to take my boat and my tactics I have on the Great Lakes and take it back out west, because the one thing I would say about out west, they have a very narrow spread of tactics. You know, they typically only run downriggers. They'll run 2 or 3 downriggers. That's it. They might stack a couple of rods per downrigger, but that's it. They've really not played around much with. They don't play with divers, especially in the Vancouver area or Victoria area. They don't play with the copper way to steal lead core. It's just it's unheard of. Planer boards are unheard of. So I always joke around that one day I do plan to move back out west, and it's not really a joke. It's a promise. Like that's where I want to eventually retire back to, and whether it be the current boat or a new boat, I'm taking it with me with all my gear, because I tell you, I think it'd be amazing to fish a lot of the Great Lakes tactics also out west. And the crazy part that's going to blow all of your minds, on the ocean, the last time I checked, and don't quote me on this because it's always important to check. It's always important to check the regulations. But last time I checked, it was unlimited rods. So there was actually no limit on rods, like 2 per person. You can run as many rods as you want, because it's all about the retention limits, and they have a very, very controlled retention program, including having to log your fish on your license and such. So very, very interesting, but great question. Okay, next we've got Mark here. Will a snap weight work for an SWR on a downrigger instead of a piece of lead core? Yeah, Mark, it absolutely can, because the SWR, there's 2 benefits to the secret weapon rig, and that's really where typically a secret weapon rig is where you have either a 2 or 3 color of lead core, or I would say even like a 50-foot, 75-foot section of weighted steel, and then you've got fluorocarbon. And what that does is it actually brings 2 things. Number one, you've got a long lead from the ball, and therefore from your boat to your spoon or your flash or whatever it may be. So that's the first benefit. The second benefit is it's also deeper, so it's away from the boat. So it's away from the cannonball as well. So those are the 2 benefits to a secret weapon rig. There's no reason why you can't do that with a snap weight. What I would say, if you're doing it with a snap weight, I would probably say, let out 50 feet, clip on that snap weight, whether it be a 1, 2, 3 ounce, whatever you want. I don't think if you're going to use it for an SWR, I don't think you need a heavy weight. Clip on that weight, and then let out another 50 feet, even maybe 100 feet. Because the thing is, if you don't let out enough, you're not going to give that snap weight an opportunity to sink deeper than your cannonball. But yeah, you can absolutely use a snap weight instead of a piece of lead core. For me, I was talking about the spring earlier. I do have a couple of I think I got 1 2-color rod and 1 3-color rod. I will use those on a stream side lead core rod in the spring, and then in the summer I just take that reel off and I put that on a downrigger rod, and then it becomes my SWR rig. So that's, again, it's back to John's earlier question. Some of the ways you can be flexible with your gear. I might have to have 2 different rods, but I'm only using the 1 reel. Okay, I got a question from Daniel. In the early spring fishing, do you fish closer to shore and river entrance, or is it the same as the summer to find your temperatures? Daniel, my view in the spring, it's typically, I would honestly say I start with watercolor. Where I'm looking for that dirtier water. Now, I'm going to be honest, not too dirty. If you get it's almost like the brown, dark stuff, I'm not a fan of that, because I frankly, I don't think the fish can see my baits, and therefore, if there are fish in there, they're not going to bite because they probably can't see my baits. I'm looking for some of that green nutrient filled water. You're still probably going to be running a lot of bright baits, globe baits, so they can see. But that's typically where I will start in the spring. What I will tell you, though, it is partially you're partially right, because that's going to be the warmer water too. So you are going to find the warmer water is the colored stained water in the spring, and that's probably what you want to fish. Now, don't get me wrong, there are times where you may not be getting any success in there, and you start pushing out and you start to mark fish, and they are down. They've actually gone down deeper, and they're in the deeper, cool water. And it doesn't mean they're not going to bite, but that's not where I'm going to start. I'm going to start closer to shore, to your point, by river entrances, creeks where there's warm water. pushing out of the creeks. And in some cases, it's also the runoff or the melt from the snow, and the sun has been warming that up. That's where I'm going to start in the spring for sure. Okay, I got a question here from Rob. Terminal tackle. Do you use snap swivels or coast lock swivels? I've been using coast lock, and I'm worried about negative effect on spoons. I thought this question was going to come up, so I've actually got a few swivels in front of me, purposeful. So I think, Rob, you're talking about this, the coast lock swivel, right here. And so that's something what you consider a coast lock swivel. I think a lot of people call this a snap swivel or a dual lock swivel. It's rounded. I'm going to tell you, I don't use that one because I do worry about the negative effects of what that does to the spoon. I like the rounded edge. But this one here, I don't really use this one either, because you get a big enough fish, this piece right here, it'll actually open up. And I've had these things coming back, and they're all mangled and opened up. So I don't use that one. I use these. I use the Torpedo ball bearing swivels, and the reason being is they're very similar to that second one, but I'm trying to show you here. But the clasp, it kind of goes around, and if you've got a fish on here pulling, in my opinion, it's actually getting tighter and tighter, and it's not going to come loose. So that's what I use. I do like the roundness. I've got a spoon here on my desk. I'll just show you guys, but I like the roundness here of this one because I feel like it's not going to affect the action of the spoon. The other thing I would say when it comes to swivels that I personally, again, it's a personal opinion, but I think it's a mistake some folks make is don't use a big swivel on your spoons. I will use a size 1 or a size 2 when I'm running a spoon. Very, very small. Like sometimes I feel like I need to put my glasses on to actually unclip them and clip them. But I don't want to run a big swivel because I feel like it takes away the action. It's adding too much weight to the spoon. The other thing I've actually been known to do, and I think I did a video on this before. Actually, I did do a video on this before, but this is one of my rigs actually from BC. And then when I was in BC, we tie a leader to every single one of our spoons. So this is actually a skinny G from Gibbs, one of my definite staple BC rigs, and it actually has a leader to the spoon, and then there's about 4 or 5 feet, and then it will go to the snap swivel. And again, it's to get more action on that spoon. Okay, let's keep going. I think we've got we got about 30 folks on the channel right now, which is great. Don't forget to click that like button and share it with other folks. The more people we get in, the more questions we'll get going, and I think it works well for everybody. Okay, so let's go to our next question. I love this question. Do you target cohos on the North Shore? I love cohos. Love them. I'm not going to lie. A lot of people, especially a lot of the recreational anglers that are in, they're competing in the derbies like the Great Ontario Salmon Derby. They're all about kings because those are king derbies. If you're a tournament fisherman fishing in some of the big tournaments, it's all about the king. Let's call it what it is. But actually, I love cohos. So for me, running a charter boat, for me, it's all 9 times out of 10. My customers couldn't care less if it's a big rainbow, big coho, or king. They want to catch fish, and they want to catch decent sized fish. They want fish in that anything above 10, 15, 20 pounds, and they're happy. So I always have rigs out for cohos. For me, especially on the North Shore, I don't do a lot of spring fishing on the North Shore, so I typically don't start fishing until about June 1st on the North Shore. If in years when I do fish earlier, I'm over on the South Shore. But what I would say when I'm fishing for cohos, those are typically going to be my 4, 5, 6 color lead cores. They're going to be, I now have a 100 and a 150 weighted steel that I'll use sometimes, or my 200 weighted steel. I find the cohos will hit, and I'm just trying to see. I got a bunch of my buckets here. They'll hit a lot of my they'll hit a lot of my flash or fly combinations. They'll hit some of my spoons. So actually, I've got a couple of spoons here. So, that is one of my favorite coho spoons. It's a glow with UV and orange dots. So spoons with orange, the cohos love those. This is I call this, I don't know what Hot Fish calls this, but I call it's like the Hot Fish Wonder Bread spoon. This one's great for cohos as well. I think it's probably because the pink and the chartreuse. Those what I will use for cohos. I will also use, like, I've got an orange spin doctor here with, actually, I think it's attached to it's got a coho killer on it with about a 7 or 8 foot lead. That is deadly for cohos, especially when I'm fishing out in the blue zone. I do have, I just can't find it right now. I do use the mini spin doctors with peanut flies for cohos. They work very, very well. I've actually done a video. If you check my previous videos, there's actually a video on offshore tactics for I want to say it's steelhead and cohos that goes over a lot of those tips. But I love fishing cohos. Last year, the cohos were abundant and they were big, really, really big. Like, I had a number of cohos in the 13, 14 pound range out of Toronto. I think there was a couple actually caught over 20 pound. There was also some hybrids, coho kings caught last year. So I love the cohos. I personally feel they're the best eating fish. That's my opinion. I think they're the best eating fish out of Lake Ontario. So I'll take a coho over a king any day of the week if I'm going to put one on the barbecue. And I would say I caught cohos all over the North Shore last year. So whether it be in fishing in 80 feet of water, 150 feet of water, or even out obviously in 350 where the cohos were abundant in the summer. If you want cohos and you're not catching too many of them, inside of 200 feet in the summer, and you really want them, that's when you probably want to, point your boat, south and troll out a little bit deeper. I find in the call it July and August. But yeah, love cohos. They're awesome. Steve asked the question, where do I get my anchovies? I've got a buddy that brings them in for me. I buy them by the case, Steve. But what I can tell you is most of the tackle shops that I'm aware of, I think, sell them. So I seem to recall Grimsby Tackle has them. I know in the past I've bought them at JB's as well. But most of the tackle shops that sell bait typically will sell anchovies. That'd be my how I get you started. Like I said, I get mine in bulk from a buddy. But yeah, they're fantastic. Love the anchovies. A little bit more work and a bit of a learning curve to get used to them, but they work really, really well. Okay, let's see what we have for some more questions here. Salmon Stalker, what's the first thing you change when the bite slows down? Depth, lures, or speed? I think it depends on when, right? So, if I think about the North Shore, but I think it's actually across most of the lake, you'll get that hot and crazy bite from sun up, and then it feels like at 8 a.m., 8:30, the bite just completely dies off. And it feels like the fish just left. And in some respects, I think they do leave. In other respects, I think they what they want changes. So I will do a number of things. First of all, when the bite really slows down, and this is very much important if I'm running if I've got a small charter with one person or two persons, this will be the first thing I do. If I'm running call it a full spread charter when I've got 9-10 rods out, I won't do this thing first because I've already got it covered. But the first thing I will do if I'm only running a few rods, and even if it's just me and my buddy going out and we're running 4 rods, I will start to pull at least one of the downriggers, and I'll only run one downrigger. Because I find when the bite slows, I find the fish are becoming more spooky. And I actually want to put gear away from the boat. So what I will do is I will actually flip to more, I will stretch the leads out on my slide divers because I run slide divers where I can put more of a lead out. And I will put out more long lines. So I'll put out more weighted steels, more lead cores. That's the first thing I will do. The second thing I will do is, this might sound pretty obvious, but I'll look at my flashers, my lures. What am I using? Because if I'm, typically in the morning, I'm running a lot of gloves. Like I'm running stuff like this, right? Like, white gloves. I'm running glow on black. I'm running lots of glows in the morning. And then, as I get further in the day, that's where I start to bring out stuff like this with some holographic tape, on the back. So I'll start to change up the lures to put more flash in the water. And I'm trying to see what I got behind me. These are not all my gear, but there you go. I'll start to bring out, the UVs, and this one's got a bit of a golden chartreuse to it. I'm brightening things up later in the day when the sun's up and that the bite feels like it's dying down. So that's another thing that I'm doing. Speed wise, I will play with speed. Typically I will go to so I'll typically go to slow down first and see if that does anything, and then if that doesn't work, I'll speed up. But actually, for me, I'm a bit spoiled. What I'll do on my boat actually is I'll get away from the pack first thing. Absolutely will get away from the pack of boats if it's slowed down and I'm about to do this. Often I will actually, instead of trolling, with the shoreline, which I think is very common for folks to troll with the shoreline, regardless of where you are. If you're on Lake Ontario, Lake Michigan, it seems to be popular trolling with the shoreline. I will actually, troll away. So on Lake Ontario, instead of going east-west, I'll troll south and then north. So I'll turn the boat south, and I will actually turn on my autopilot. I got a zigzag mode, and I will turn on zigzag mode. And what that does, it actually makes the boat do continuous turns back and forth. And what that's doing is I'm speeding up and slowing down all the time, because what's making one side go limp and slow down, and it's making another side speed up and go faster. And when it comes to lead cores or those weighted steels, it's pulling the fast side is pulling them up, and the slow side they're dropping. And that's what I will do. But it's the same thing as what you said, Steve. With the speed. But I will typically turn out. The other thing I would say though, and it's not because I said I'll typically turn out. It's not always right. I don't always get it right. Sometimes, especially in that Toronto area, I might be fishing at 150, 200 feet of water, and those poor salmon have had they've had gear and jewelry run in front of them all morning. I find often going out works for me, and if it doesn't work for me with salmon, I often will pick up coho and rainbows. But sometimes it's about turning in and getting away from the pack, slowing it down, and you might be finding those kings have moved in closer and they're still hungry, but you just got the right speed and the right gear. So that's what I think. But thank you for the question, Salmon Stalker. Okay, next question here. In the spring when surface is high, low. Okay, in the spring when the surface is high 40s, low 40s, 50 down. Do you fish marks or upper 30 with short carpers and cores, or do you mix it up? For me in the spring, like I would go back to it's and I'm going to assume you're talking more in more shallow, close to the shore. I don't think it's about the temperatures. It's to me it's about the watercolor and am I seeing fish? But obviously if I'm in super dark, like almost brown water and I'm seeing fish, I'm probably not going to get them to bite because they're not going to be able to see my gear. So for me, it's about trying to find the right color water, which is typically that green nutrient-filled water, and having fish there. But what I would say about that though, it is I'd say slow down. Like in the spring, if you're someone like me that likes to fish 2.2, I have to like force myself in the spring to say, you know what, no, I need to be trolling at like 1.6, 1.7, 1.8. Got to slow it down. The water's cold, so I find that the fish want a much slower speed. If I flip that question a bit and say, I'm fishing out of, let's say, Toronto, and it's May, and I've caught kings in May, but the water's cold. Like you're seeing it's between 50 and call it 40, almost the entire column. That's when I'm going to look for marks. I'm going to look for marks because I've pulled lots of kings out in May in that 40 to 50 degree water. Down 40, 50, 60, 70 feet. Those are fish that have come over early. I feel they've climatized themselves to that water, and they still need to eat. So, but I think your question's more related to probably in the skinnier water. To me, less temperature. The water is going to be cold everywhere. Less temperature, more about the color, and then slow down. Okay, what length rods are you using for your wire rods? I'd say it's a bit of a personal question for a lot of folks. I'll tell you what I do. I run the stream side rods. So I've got a 9 foot I got a set of 9'6", and I got a set of 10'6". That being said, I'm just looking over there. I've got they're too far for me to go get, but I got a set of brand new. I think it's their 10-foot roller rods. I'm just gonna spool up shortly. So for me, I'm gonna probably run the 9'6" standards and then the 10-foot rollers this coming season. I do like a longer rod when you're running dipsy divers. I'd say for a couple of reasons. First of all, I need the two sizes. If I'm gonna run two on each side, I personally feel I need the two sizes to stagger things out and get some separation. The second thing is, I run a slide diver, so I could probably get away with a shorter rod. But for me, if you're not running slide divers, I think you need a long dipsy rod, because the longer the dipsy rod, the longer leader I think you can run between that dipsy and your baits. And you can still run longer than your rod, but it just becomes easier to actually, call it manhandle that rod and that leader almost over your head as you're trying to net the fish. So for me, I feel the longer dipsy rod is the better. I wouldn't go over 10.5. I think anything over that's too long. But last 2 seasons I've run 9.6 and 9.6 on my deep divers, my mags, and 10.6 on my standard mag. That's my standard divers, which are my high divers. That's what I've been running. Thank you for that question. Okay. K-Max, when I watch your early summer fishing reports, even then you don't seem to use super slims for cohos. Do you only use standard and magnums? Yeah, I only pretty much use, these are a bunch of you can see a lot of my spoons, sorry, that side. A lot of my spoons behind me. I don't, I got a spoon. I got a couple of special mates over there. I got to go through them and actually get rid of a bunch of them, and a bunch of them I'm gonna repaint, because I'm not a guy that uses 50 different spoons. I've got my 10 to 15 go-tos and they work. And for me, it's standards or mags. I really don't feel the need to play around with all different sizes. I catch fish without them. I was trying to look. I don't see it there. I do have a few that are. They're like standard size, but they're a bit fatter. I like those because I think the alewife have a fat belly. So when we got the alewife around, and I can see there's some small alewife for them, I'll use those because of the extra fat bottom on them that I think mimics the belly. But yeah, I'm not a super slim guy. Standards and mags do the job. Nothing against super slims. They work as well. So I'm not going to tell you not to use them. I just I believe in the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. If I can do it with the two different sizes, then I do. Okay. What conditions does glow, UV, and RV dominate your spread? So first, I'm going to share something that I think people get mixed up or don't realize. UV and RV is the exact same thing. Moonshine call it RV. It is the same tape, and I'm going to actually grab it and show you guys here. Give me a second. So this is a roll of transparent, what we call UV tape, what people call slick. This is a roll of it right here. This is, and I say transparent, this has no backer on it. So if I peel away, here, you'll see it's transparent. Like I could, as I put that even over the lens. What's cool about this stuff is if you put it on here, I've taken myself out of focus. That should come back. There we go. So if I put this on white, like the backer, you get this crazy rainbow UV color. If I put this on black, this is the crushed version, but it's the same thing. If I put this on black, you get this goldy brown color. If I put it on green, you get green and chartreuse, you get this gold, light gold, bronze color. That is RV. That is what Moonshine call RV. It's all the same tape. It's this stuff. They make it in flat, and they make it in crush. It's also, and I just don't have it here. Oh, here we go. If you put this on yellow, you get that. It's one tape. It's one tape. It's a big misconception. So UV and RV is actually the same. Moonshine has tried to market something different. It works. Don't get me wrong. I'm not downplaying what they do, but that's what it is. So now, now I'll answer your question. When do I use glow? So as I talked about in the spring, that dirty water, lots of glow, lots of bright colors. I am a big fan of glow. So when I'm starting out in the morning fishing, I'm always starting with glow. So glow is just, if it doesn't glow, it doesn't go in the morning. That's the best way to say it. So mornings a glow, evenings. So once I get to about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the summer, I'm starting to switch everything out and getting much glow in there. So I'm ready to go as the sun starts coming down. I'm all glowed up. And then really for me, once the sun's up, that's when I start to go put a lot more of that UV stuff down. I'm putting down the UV. I'm putting down chrome. I'm putting down holographic. The one thing you'll find from me, and I think many of you know, I make a lot of my own gear. I make a lot of custom gear. I supply a lot of the captains and a lot of tournament guys around Lake Ontario. But even I got an order I got to finish today after this video. It's going out to Chicago. But one of the things I like to do is, I like to make, I look at this one right here. This is one of my most popular. We call it UV Sick. The front of this is glow. It's crushed glow with a glow eye. On the back, I've got that UV. I've actually got that clear UV. It looks like this because it's getting the white from the back of the glow. This will be a paddle I put out all day long because, I've got the glow for the morning. I've got the transparent UV that you even get glow coming through the back. But as the sun comes up, this is doing its job. So I've got a lot of different paddles like that. This is something a little different, but here's a glow blade. I've got, crushed glow with black dots in the front. On the back, I've got what I call it's gasoline or pearl. That's another one that I find good for during the day. But again, I will put that out because I can leave that out all day, as long as it's working, of course. But that's kind of my approach. Like the glow is more the morning and the morning, dawn and dusk, and then I'm brightening things up. But I still like to have some glow out there. This was one of my most productive flashers last year. This is on a hot fish, but you can see the front, I got a glow strip with dots. On the back, it's just silver holographic. Like nothing. This isn't a crazy flasher. This is one of my customs. Like you can only get this one from me, but it's it's versatile, glow with the holographic, and it works. So that's how I would answer that question. Now the caveats to that is if it's a rough, windy day, but still fishable, cloudy, that's when I'm still gonna have some glow out there for sure. I'm not gonna be there are times you got to look at what's the environment around, and then we'll still make sure I've got glow out there. Okay, thank you. That was a great question. I'm glad I was able to touch on I've been hearing the RV term so much lately, and I wanted to touch on that. So, hey, I guess I got Nick saying he looks like I got my hands full of questions. I do, Nick, and that's great. Keep them coming. I got a question from Russell Gillen. Do I run cowbells for lake trout? No, I don't. I was talking about lake trout earlier. I only fish lake trout typically in the spring. And I fish lake trout on the south shore of Lake Ontario. Typically, it's out of Port Dalhousie or St. Catharines Fishing Game, the ramp there when I have a trailable boat. And I find, when I fish lake trout out there, I'm fishing typically in that 60 to 80 feet of water most of the time for them. And they're abundant. And I find, I was saying at the start of this video, I've got a spoon it's a chrome spoon with a blue stripe, and it hammers lake trout. So, for me, like that is my go-to. It's very, very rarely that they don't take great lake trout. Have I fished with peanut flies and for different ways? Yeah, I have. For lake trout, have I tried, lake trout will take flies. Have I tried spinning glows? Yeah, I've done them all, but I just find actually where I am, I can use that blue and silver spoon, and it does magic. I think it's actually a matrix spoon. It's something I probably picked up at, I think, Bass Pro or Sale like 10, 15 years ago to try it out, and it did so well. I went back, I bought like half a dozen of them, and I find I never lose them because it's lake trout. They're not too crazy, and it works really, really well. When do you decide to run naked bait versus Twinkies? I'd say as a charter guy especially, but even for you guys, if you're recreational and you're out with a bunch of buddies, my view is mix it up and see what the salmon tell you. So I would say, I'll typically start out if I'm running an 8-rod spread. That 8-rod spread will typically consist of 3 to 4 meat rigs, a couple of flies, and a couple of spoons. Like I do mix up the baits. And if I'm running the 4 meat rigs, sometimes I'll run 2 anchovies, sometimes I'll run 2 strips, other times I'll run all anchovies, sometimes I'll run all strips. But what I'll do is I'll make sure that 2 of them are clean, 2 of them are Twinkies, and I'll see what the fish want. I'll see what they're telling me. There's days that they want Twinkies, they want all that extra flash and that more aggressive presentation, and there's days where they want nothing to do with that. This is that, similar to that UV stick I showed you earlier on. This is on a glow blade, but it's same back. And this is actually one of my. I only have a few anchovy rigs with Twinkie flies, but this is one of my very, very good ones. This one goes down. It only goes down below 100 feet. Like, this is my deep glow. The Twinkies they've actually got glow and UV in them, and then I got the glow head. So. For me, I believe you kind of see what the fish want. The one thing I would say, when I'm running a Twinkie rig, my Twinkie rig is typically a 40 pound material. I use Seagar STS. When I'm running it naked, I will take that down to a 30 pound. I don't feel you need to go as high. And the naked rigs, whether it be an anchovy or a herring strip, to me it's a more stealth presentation, and I knock the line down. Okay, next. When you stack or use sliders, do you commonly use the same spoon pattern, high and low? Yes, I do. I will typically use either the exact same spoon, or sometimes I'll actually mix it up. And that's why you see behind me, I've got, for example, if I take these right here, this is one of my favorite spoons. It's the hot fish spoon here. I've got I think they call it their G-spot. And then I got a smaller version here, right? So I've got the 2 versions. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually have the smaller one on the bottom, and I'll have the bigger one on the top, or sometimes I'll flip it. Sometimes I'll have 2 of the same. But yeah, I definitely do use that. For me, I would say when I'm fishing for mainly kings, but still using spoons earlier in the season, I will typically use a fixed cheater, and that's where I use a black offshore clip. I've got some over on my bench here because I'm actually just retying leaders right now, and I'll use that and I keep meaning to do a video on this, but I'll use that to basically I'll let out my spoon, clip it to the rigger, let it down 10, 15 feet, and then I clip on the second spoon, and then put the snap swivel around the line. And then when the fish hits, it pops the snap off, the clip off, and then slides down. When I'm fishing for kings, I typically use that method. And then later on in the season, when I often will start still with 1 spoon rigger, because I find I can get kings all year long on a spoon. But what I will do is I will then flip to sliders, because I want that slider kind of just moving up and down on the bow of the line, and that slider will take the rainbows of the cohos. But yeah, I like to use the same spoon pattern or something close. Does it matter? I don't know. I've had times where I've not used the same spoon and I've still caught fish. So, I've also had it where I'll use the green one here on the bottom, and then I'll have an orange one up high. But it's orange. It's similar, like it's the same spoon blank, crushed glow, just with orange dots versus green, and I'll have that for cohos. So that's something I've done as well. Okay, let's keep going. We got a few more questions, I think, and maybe good time just to remind folks. Don't forget to like the this video today, and if you can click on the share button, it gets more people viewing, and hopefully we get more questions. We get more questions coming in, and if you haven't done so, please click on my so the subscribe button to subscribe to my channel. Lots of great videos, and you'll get notified when I bring up new videos or have new live casts going on. Okay, so let's see. Next we have, what's your go-to tackle when looking for that lunker? Typically, if I'm looking for a big king, it's typically going to be either a meat strip or an anchovy, and I'm gonna be running slower. This is maybe my personal views, but I find my bigger fish come on clean rigs, not Twinkie. Don't know why, but it feels like that's the case. But I can also tell you, this spoon here is taking some big kings, so I'm not gonna downplay that's why it's my most, this one and the black dot one you see right there behind me, some big kings. So, but typically it's meat or an anchovy, and I'm slowing the troll down. I'm probably in that 1.9 2.0 on my Fishhawk X4. Okay. Now, let's see what else we got for questions here. I've answered that one already. Do you find that high sun, flat water is time to go with less is more when it comes to rods in the water, and time for longer leads and weighted steel and copper? Yeah, I hate fishing high sun, flat water. It's the worst. My customers love it because no one's getting sick, right? Because the average person that books a charter, they are not, they maybe are not as comfortable on the water like those of us that have our own boats and such. But it's tough. It's tough fishing. With that high sun, flat water, I would say that's when I definitely, like I said earlier, I moved to silver and holographic. I'm running UV, and yeah, definitely. Like if you're only running 2 rods or 4 rods or even 6 rods, I would say that's when you want to start sitting there and saying, maybe you take out your down, maybe you remove one of your downriggers, put an extra long line out, or maybe even take out 2 of your downriggers and put out an extra long line. There was a day a few years ago, my charter never showed up, and I was like, well, I'm here, I'm at the boat, I'm gonna go fish, and all the other guys were out doing their charters, all my buddies that are recreational guys, they were all gone, and here I am sitting and waiting for my customers that never showed. So I was like, I'm gonna go fishing. I'm going with my own, and I started out with one rigger and 1 diver. Well, after 3 fish on the diver, it told me that the rigger was no good, and next thing you know, here I am solo fishing with 2 divers. Now, before people say, how the heck do you solo fish with 2 divers? Don't forget, I run slide divers, so that diver slides right down to that flasher fly, and I've only got like that of a leader, so it's easy enough for me to do. But I share that story because it was a high sun day, and they wanted baits away from the boat. I've my buddy Steve could vouch for this. I'll sometimes go fishing with him just for fun, and I always bring a couple of rods with me, and even though he's got a fully loaded boat, and I always bring my 250 weighted steel with me. And even though it's just him and I fishing, and most guys, if they're just fishing 2 people, they will running. They'll typically run two downriggers and 2 divers. When I go on someone else's boat and we're doing, hey, these are your 2 rods, these are my 2 rods, my 250 weighted steel goes because it's away from the boat. So for me, when it's high sun, flat water, I'm not sure less is more. I think it's about getting them away from the boat. So I will go out and I will run, again, subject to the space, because if it's a crazy Saturday and there's 300 boats out, I can't do this, but I'll try and get away from the boats, and I'll run, either if I have my big boards out, like my on my planer mast with my otter boats, I will run maybe 3 lines per side. If not, and I use a lot of the Dreamweaver Ninjas, I'll have 2 Ninjas on each side, and I'll have 1 rod down the chute that I'll use to get them away from the boat. So yeah, I like the last part of your comment, which is around the time for longer leads and weighted steel and copper. I'm not a copper guy, can't stand copper, but for me it's weighted steel and lead core. Okay, let's see. Next question. I can only run 2 downriggers. I've been using meat and spoons. Would you recommend running 2 meat slower, two spoons faster, or 1 meat and 1 spoon, splitting the difference with speed? Peter, it's a really good question. I think it's about understanding your baits and understand what the fish want. So what I would say is, and this might be a bit of a plug for a company that I use in Ontario out of Owen Sound, Hotfish. But Hotfish, and this is a Hotfish spoon right here. This spoon is far thinner. It's far thinner, and it is not a heavy spoon. So for me, this is like the optimal spoon to run with meat. So like on my boat, once the summer comes, like it's pretty much like might as well just set it at 2.2 because that is the trolling speed I use 90% of the time. Because this spoon works amazing at 2.2, and so do meat rigs. So for me, if I can, I actually try to find baits that will work together with the right speed. And the other thing I'll say that I think you're missing from your question, Peter, is if you haven't used flasher flies yet, I'd highly recommend you look into flasher flies because I'm a big when I was fishing solo a lot before, when I was just a recreational guy, or I would I'd run 2 riggers like you, and I'd run 1 with meat and I'd run 1 with a flasher fly, because I find you can run meat at 1.8, 2.0, 2.2, and you can run a flasher fly at that speed, no problem. Typically, I'll take my flasher fly and I'll literally wrap. I'm trying to see if I got one here. I don't have one right here, but I will typically my leader on my fly from the bottom of the tinsel on the fly to the flasher. I do 3 times the flasher, and that will typically work fine with a meat rig and give enough action to the fly. So that's another option. If you find you don't like the action of that fly and you want a little more, you can go to 2.5 times. The 2.5 times the flasher for the leader length, and that actually will make that fly be a bit more erratic. So that's what I would do. But I would say for me, you can't. I do know people that will take 1 meat, 1 spoon, and say I'm going to run it 2.3, 2.4, and it works. And don't get me wrong, it will work. But I like to run a lighter spoon, and that's why I run these Hotfish spoons here, because they're much lighter. Like this is a standard spoon here, like. And unfortunately, I don't have a scale here, but it is way heavier than this one right here. Okay. Hey, Walker, when is Tony going to start producing some of your custom colors? I think you're talking about Tony from Hotfish. I'm going to say he's not. So Tony sends me all kinds of people to make custom colors, because I do make custom colors for folks. Tony is a tackle manufacturer, as everyone knows. He's got colors that are really his go-to colors that work well, and there's nothing against Tony's colors. They're excellent. I have some of Tony's colors. That's one of his right here. That's one of his. That's one of his. So is this one here. I've got some of Tony's colors. I use them and they work great. And then you've got some of my colors, right? So Tony's making mass production. Custom stuff, it takes time. It takes real time. And also some of the custom stuff, like I've got some custom ones where you're talking it's 3 pieces of tape, 4 pieces of tape. So every time you add a piece of tape, the cost adds up, right? So it's not something you can, it's not something I think you can easily have on the shelf. I think Tony's probably trying to avoid having 300 and 400 different flashers. So, Tony, if you ask Tony to, if you were to send him a message saying, "Hey, Tony, can you make me this custom flasher?" He's probably going to respond to you with my name. That's it just works really, really well. Because I make lots of the custom stuff, and then he's got his standard colors that again are they work quite well as well. Okay, do you change your hooks to singles or run more trebles? So a couple of things. When it comes to spoons, I use the Hotfish ones, and they typically come with singles, and I'm a big fan of singles. That's that was a question earlier about any tips from out west, and I said anchovies. The other tip I would say out west, 90% of the time they're using singles, especially on the Canadian side. I can't speak for the American side there, but on the Canadian side they're running singles, and that's a great tip I would share as well. So I'm I run single hooks a lot of the time on my spoons. When it comes to flies, I like to use, and I'm got a bag of them here. When it comes to flies, I'm using a 4-aught octopus hook. And when it comes to meat rigs, that's where I'll play around. I'll run singles or I'll run trebles. And if I am running a treble, I'm running the Torpedo trebles. But there's far more singles on my boat than there are trebles. I was actually bugging Matthew from Torpedo to say, hey, he's got some great hooks. I'm like, Matthew, you got to start making some singles. So we'll see what he has in the future. But I'm a big fan of the singles. I find with a single hook, once the fish is hooked up, you're not losing the fish. And I don't get too many knockoffs where the rigger goes or the rod goes and it's gone. So I feel like the hookup rate's really strong, really high, and the retention of that fish to bring them to the boat is really, really high. Trebles, I find you lose too many fish. There's too many pivot points for the fish to maneuver and rip that treble out. As I think about out west, the one thing I didn't mention out west when I was talking earlier, and I got asked that question, out west, you can only run every hook has to be barbless on the Canadian side. I don't know about the American side, but on the Canadian side, it's barbless. So I think that tells you something when the hook of choice is a single and it has to be barbless. I personally feel a barbless treble, you would never get those fish in the boat. So I think that's why. Okay, let's see. Next question. What do I think about slide divers on braid? Yeah, they work. No problem, Daniel. Slide divers on braid are great. The one comment I would make to you about slide divers on braid, it's the fleas, right? Once the spiny water fleas come out, braid's just a pain in the ass. So that's the only reason I wouldn't use them on braid too often. I got a couple of reels somewhere that I don't use very often, but they're for the spring when I use the smaller slide divers, and I'll use those on braid with a fluorocarbon leader. My slide diver setup now, actually, I use wire, but the slide diver cannot, and I repeat, cannot slide on the wire. So what I then have is I have about a 12-inch section of braid. That's, I think it's 80 or 100 pounds, 12-inch section. And then I actually have, I run like a 30-40 section of 40-pound mono. And my slide diver actually just slides on that mono. And then I don't even need to use a snubber because the mono has got enough stretch in it. So that's my go-to slide diver setup, but there's nothing wrong with running them on braid. So I was out fishing with someone on their boat last year, and took my wire rod and with a slide diver, and unfortunately I think it was the first fish in, and it got mangled with another line, and it was out of commission for the day. I actually got to respool that rod because it was like one of the last trips of the year, and so basically I took the slide diver, I clipped off the mono section, I tied it to his braid rod, and we fished that slide diver on the braid the rest of the day. So yeah, not a problem at all. Okay, let's see. We got some more questions coming in. This is fantastic. I love this. Okay, we've got a question from Rob. What size treble hooks are you using for your trolling flies and meat rigs? Here, I'm going to grab the packages. Give me 2 seconds. Okay, I'm back. I run 3 sizes. I've got the Torpedo size ones. Those I will use with, I will use those sometimes with an anchovy. When I'm running with an anchovy, I'll run a treble with, an octopus stinger behind it, and I'll use the size ones. Sorry, no, the size twos. Sorry, I use the size twos on that. When I'm running with a fly, if I do run a treble, I don't run a treble very often with a fly, but when I do, I'll use the size twos. And then here's the 1-aughts. I use the 1-aughts if I'm running with a spoon. But I basically keep, call it in stock here in my workshop. I keep these 3: size 1, size 2, and the 1-aughts. But like I said, for flies, it's the number 1. Okay, next. How do you charge your glow spoons? So I know there's this big, I'm sorry, I feel like there's a big fad right now about having these glow boxes and these these glow cups that people are using for ice fishing, and now they're making these bigger ones that you can put your flashers in and your lures. I forget about that. I have this. I have a UV light. I have a UV light, and let me tell you, I just run that light up and down the spoon as 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds, and they glow like crazy. So, like, to me, actually, I keep meaning to put a link on my descriptions of my videos to Amazon, but you can get these UV lights on Amazon. They work great. Battery. Some of them are battery operated. Some of them are rechargeable. But use a UV light. The other thing I would say, I've got under gunnel lights on my boat, and I've under the gunnels, and I've got neon blue. And believe it or not, the neon blue is actually really good at charging the lures also. So often when I'm running out in the morning, I'll put my starting lineup along the floor underneath the gunnels, and I'll turn those underneath gunnel lights on, the blue, and it'll charge the rigs up also that way. So perfect. Okay, Sean asked the question, have you ever used Smelts on your anchovy rigs? I have not, Sean. I find them too small. I've not been able to find. I don't find they're beefy enough, and I also find Smelts don't brine up well, because on an anchovy rig, and I check out my video, folks, on anchovies, because I've got a video that I talk about running anchovies and actually tying the rig and how to run them through. I think I have a plastic anchovy I used to show. I might have one with a real anchovy in the video as well, but you have to put a hook in the body of the fish, and then you put a toothpick, and then you put a toothpick in this little hole here, and then you tighten the line through and you create the curve. Well, if you cannot brine that fish very well, that hook's gonna rip the fish apart, and it's gonna last like 5 minutes, and it's gonna be garbage. So that's where you need a very robust fish, and that's where I find the anchovies. Or if you can get them, they're not very common, but if you can find some of the very small herring, like the 4 or 5 inch herring, those work really, really well. There was a time many years ago I saw some sardines that worked like that, but I don't use smelt because I find they're not strong enough. Okay, another good question. What are my thoughts on scent? Wow, you guys are making me move all over the place here. Okay, I'm gonna go with the common scent first, then we'll talk about some of the other things. These are my scent choices right here. Mike's Lunker lotion. I like the alewife and I like the herring. I have used, I think they got one at sardine. They've got a few different ones, and they work. But these are my two go-to. They got an anchovy one, I think, too. They got a sardine one, I think. They've got a krill one. They all seem to work. These are the two I have on the boat. And I don't put a spoon down without scent now. I used to never run scent, and it was actually my father. I remember one day fishing with my father. We're actually fishing out in front of the Pickering nuclear plant with a couple of buddies and my dad, and it was tough. And my dad's like, "You should put the scent out." I'm like, "It doesn't do anything. Like I was like, it's a gimmick." Well, don't question your old man. Like they know stuff. There's certain things they just know. So he takes this scent, he puts it on the spoon, he puts it out. Not even, and it might have been dumb luck, but 10 minutes later it just gets whacked. And meanwhile, we've been struggling for like I couldn't tell you how long. And so then I was pretty much converted. I started using the Atlas Mike stuff, and I find it works really, really well. It is tough to find. Like, it's not one of those things that you can find on Amazon in Canada. If you're in the US, you can find it no problem in the US via Amazon and lots of stores. It is tougher to find here. The good news is if you're it's not close to me, but I'd say one of the best places to get this stuff is Grimsby Tackle. I've spoken to Mark at Grimsby Tackle. He does have the Atlas Mike's Lunker lotion. I don't know what he's got in stock right now, but I spoke to him a month or so ago, and he had it. So that's where I would if you're a local guy and you're looking for scent, give Mark at Grimsby Tackle a shout. Oh, and before I forget, the other thing I use for scents, and this is the unconventional. I use this stuff. This is herring oil. This is herring oil that is actually for pets. It's to put in their food. This you can get on Amazon. And this is actually, I will use this, not so much on my spoons. I will use this on my artificial bite my herring rigs. I will actually douse them in this. I'm not going to do this because I'm going to give this one away to someone, but sometimes I'll actually take it, open the bag, I'll put some of the oil in and leave it in there and get it all nice and stinky. So I do absolutely believe in scent now. I was converted. Okay, let's keep going. We've got a few more questions, and you know, don't forget to like, but more importantly, share this video, because if we get more people asking questions, there's more going on. It's been great. We've been I'm watching. I've got 3 screens here, so I keep having to look around. One's got questions, one's got, you know, call it you guys, and then one's got the actual YouTube dashboard. And I can see, you know, we've had 30-40 people at any given moment. So that's fantastic. And we've got questions coming in. So that's really, really great. What I will say though, actually, I'm gonna do a follow-up question first, because it's related to the last question. Do you clean your spoons before you add scent? Yeah, absolutely. I clean my spoons. I've got a microfiber cloth, and I'll just take that and clean the spoon off and make it nice. The other thing I will do, and you know, hopefully she doesn't watch this video, but I have been known when my wife is out to take my spoons and actually hang them on the dishwasher rack, you know, hang them up and actually run them on a dishwasher cycle at the end of the season, and it makes them nice and clean. And then I just dry them off with a similar microfiber cloth to get them ready for the next season. But don't tell my wife I'd said that. Okay, next question though was Eric's Adventures Fishing. What are my thoughts on the density of material on flies? Is super bushy or very thin? Oh, that's like the old kid's storybook, you know, the 3 bears. Like, which one's, you know, mama, father, or baby? Like, it's finding what's just right. So I would say I'm not, you know, I think you have to go back. Actually, part of this, you got to go back to how fast you're trolling and how long's your leader. If you're running a super bushy fly, it's gonna be heavy. And then especially if it's got a bullet on the end, if you got some big beads, like I don't have them with me, but I don't run 10 mil beads. I run a 6 mil bead because I want less weight. So for me, I don't run a super bushy fly. I run the hot fish flies. Like, that'd be my go-to. You know, I do make some of my own custom if it's just something I want personally, but I run the hot fish flies. And I think they're a medium. Like, they're not super thin, they're not super bushy, and they work just right for me. I think, but then again, you know, I've had some that they've been beaten up big time by salmon, and there's barely anything left, and they work. So I'm not gonna, if it ain't broken, I ain't gonna fix it, if you know what I mean. I do think, I know, and especially as I was playing around with my own flies, I do think when I first started making my own flies, I made them way too bushy, and I could see that the action wasn't there, and I wasn't getting bit. So for me, I think I'm not a big fan of the big bushy fly. If you do run a bushy fly, I think you really have to speed up. Okay. So let's see what we have for questions coming in here. I got a bunch now. Do you run braid on your rigger rods when fishing deep? I'm gonna start by saying yes and no, John. I do, because when you're fit, you know, I go back to a tournament last year, King of Kings tournament. It's a big money tournament, $2,000 entry fee. Like, you got a lot on the line, and the fish were deep, and I did not have my deep rods on the boat at that time. I had my mono downriggers. Big mistake. I will not do that ever again. They now stay on the boat. But we're fishing down 130, 150, 170 on the downriggers, and we were getting bit, but we were losing 2 out of every 3 fish because that bow in the line on the monofilament. So absolutely, I do run braid. The only problem is when the fleas are out, braid's junk, no good. So what I've actually done, and I have done a video on this also, so if you look at my past videos, you can actually see it. I now use Torpedo 19-strand wire. And I've got you done a video on this using Torpedo 19-strand wire, and then you actually tie on your monofilament. And the video I've done explains all the way how to do this. And it's like braid. It's like direct drive, I call it, right? Like you basically, you see that line, it's going straight down to your clip, down 150, 180 feet. You do have some mono on there because, first of all, you know, the mono is what connects into the clip, and I use the black clips. So I have to wrap them around. It's the mono. I'm not wrapping no wire around those clips. But you know, when you when a fish hits, it can be a bit more violent, obviously, but the mono does have some stretch, but it impales that hook in the fish's mouth, and far less lost fish. So yes, it's a very, very, very good question. When I am fishing deep, like I learned the hard way. Okay, like we should have had a really good box, and we did not have the box we should have had because we lost too many fish. And we were, myself and my buddy Paul, we were at the back of the boat. We were on those riggers quicker than you can imagine, and taking the slack out of them, but we just were not fast enough with the amount of extra line. So that's I agree 1,000%. I love this next question from Charlie. Importance of logbooks. I'm a big fan of logging in some way, shape, or form, Charlie. I'm a firm believer, knowledge is power, and what happened the previous year may not be exactly the same, but I think it's about what was the day, what were the conditions. So I absolutely do make notes. One thing I do, obviously with this channel, every time I'm out, I actually do reports, and I talk about the conditions and what's going on. So that's also kind of my way of a logbook, where I can go back and actually look and say, okay, so what was happening in that week the previous year. But yeah, I'm a firm believer of logbooks. I think they're very important. Highly recommend. I think you want to be talking about what were the weather conditions like. Warm, sunny, cloudy, windy. Even if you've got something around the currents, I think that's really, really important. And then talking about what was working, what wasn't working, what was the water temperature. That's a huge one. Water temperature, surface, and down temps. I think those are all really important pieces. When I was out west, we would also we talked about the tides. What was the tide doing at that time? All really, really important information that I think you should have. Okay, I got some thumbs up here from Scott. Thank you, Scott. John finds it awesome. That's great. This is awesome. Love hearing from folks that are, Lake Michigan, but love learning from us Eastern folks. And I agree. I can tell you there's, I know there's this Tangle Tackle out in, I think he's on Lake Michigan. I watch his channel and learn tons of stuff from him. So you're absolutely right. I think there's a ton that can be learned from different people, whether it be on the Great Lakes or out west. The salmon are the salmon at the end of the day. And we got to give them what they want, and we can learn from each other so much. So I completely agree with you, Salmon Stalker. I do. We're getting towards the end of the questions. So I would just a friendly reminder: if you got any more questions, please feel free to bring them in. There was a few questions I got in advance, so I'm actually going to work through some of those in a second. I just have to actually get them up here on my phone. But one question I do have actually is. It just came in right now, and actually it's a good question. It's related to one of the questions I got. And by the way, I like the picture of your boat in the avatar because I think it looks very similar to mine with the blue-green hull. So looks good. But what's my opinion on fishing temperatures? And so I actually had a question in advance about what do you do? What do you do after a blow? And how do you decide where to fish? So I'm going to answer your question first, hook me up sport fishing, and then I'm going to, and then from there, I'm going to actually talk about after a blow. So what's my opinion on fishing temperatures? I feel it's where you start. If you haven't been out on the water in a while, and you can get access to some temperature information through some of the websites and stuff, I think that's where you absolutely start. You start with trying to find the good temperatures. If you're then on the water and you're trying to let's say you found I'm going to make this up. You found 62 degrees surface and you found a nice, 48 down temperature that is, that you love. Great. Start there. But if you're not getting bit and you're seeing fish down deeper in the 43 and the 44, dump your rods down there. Because I tell you, I've seen it time and time again. Like I got this great temperature and I'm not getting bit and I'm not seeing marks. I'm seeing marks that are out of temperature. And you drop your rods down there and bang, it happens. So yeah, I believe temperature's a starting point, but if there's fish out of temperature, they will bite. When I'm fishing, when I go fishing in the blue zone, which is often what I have to do after a big blow, I will have most of my gear up in that 50 feet plus, because that's typically where the warmer water is. But let me tell you, there is always a mag diver out about 200 to 250, and there is always a rigger down 100 or 120 feet. And that is like the ice water. And let me tell you, I've pulled some huge kings out from that water. It may not be the rod that's going off every 5 minutes, but I get some huge kings on that rod. So, you know, you see the marks, they will bite. You know, I think too many folks make the mistake of just fishing the temperature, and there's no marks and there's no fish. So I think you got to use your electronics, all of your electronics. So your temperature and your sonar and what you're seeing from marks. So really good question. And it kind of goes into the question about what do you do when you haven't been on the water in a while, or what do you do after a big blow, and where do you go to fish? And my advice there would be, again, look at what's the data you can get. So if you can't get any information from other anglers, that's when I'm looking at the various different websites, like the NOAA website for the boys. You know, I think there's other websites that have the water temperature forecast. I'm looking at that first of all, because if there's a big blow, I don't want to be fishing in that ice water. So, you know, when I know there's a blow, I will look at those temperature maps, and I will head towards the warmer water. And that's what I will do to start fishing right after a blow. You know, and you'll see, you know, I talked about that dark, you know, nothing going on water. You'll see as you start trolling in, or not trolling, as you start going towards that warmer water, you will see the water color change. There was one trip I won't forget last year. We've been having horrendous fishing. Everyone was crying. Like, luckily for me, I'd actually taken a few days off and I missed a good chunk of it. But everyone was crying. I gotta go do a charter, and I'm like, oh my god, like, guys are telling me 1-2 fish. That's it after, you know, 6 hours on the water. You know, they were extending trips trying to find fish for customers. And I looked at the temperature map, and I could see like it just looked like the warm water was like right at the borderline, the Canada-US borderline. So I literally powered up and went all the way out. Oh my god, it was probably 12, 13 miles. I went out with my charter crew, and I got out there, and it was beautiful green water, scum lines, the whole bit. I was literally fishing. I was probably less than half a mile from the border. Like, I like to say, I was like 2 feet from the border. It was that close. I was fishing that out in the middle, and I was literally fishing like I was in 80 feet of water, because I literally had my gear all in the top 80 feet of water. And I think we limited out in 3 hours. And I'm talking like, you know, a 5-person charter limiting out, because it was the fish were there. So that's when I think temperature matters. Temperature matters when you've had big blows and such. Awesome. That was a great question. I like that one. Okay. Peter says, I've been told up on Georgian Bay, as the water is so clear, not to go longer than 8-inch flashers. If I'm going deeper after the morning bite, could I go up to 10 or 12-inch and not spook the fish? So, Peter, you're absolutely right around Georgian Bay and the clear water. It is very common for folks to use smaller flashers on Georgian Bay. However, this is the Hot Fish 10 flasher. This was designed by Tony DeGasperis, who is probably the best Georgian Bay charter captain. And he uses this flasher pretty much exclusively on his boat because it's his product. So I will tell you, don't only use 8-inch flashers. You know, you can get away with a 10-inch. I'd say you can even probably get away with an 11-inch. I probably wouldn't use a lot of the larger, like 13-inch kingfishers, unless you're going really, really deep. But you don't have to use just an 8-inch. Like I said, Tony's made those flashers. He uses them on his boat pretty much exclusively, and they're 10 inches. And actually, he calls them the Hot Fish 10. You know, if I do grab, I got another one. I got one here. If I do grab his flasher, grab an 11-inch flasher. What's that? They're literally, actually, this is probably the best way to do it. 1/2 inch difference. So I call them a 10.5-inch flasher. So yeah, you can absolutely use them. Okay, I was trying to pull up those questions and I forgot. So give me a sec. Let me make sure we haven't missed anything. I love this question. I got this question from K-Max before the Q&A, and it said, what would be my ideal 6-rod spread, and would it change over the season? I love the question because if I think about, fishing out of bluffers, in, June, July, August, my typical 6-rod spread would be 2 downriggers, two downriggers, 2 divers. One downrigger would have a spoon with a fixed cheater. Another downrigger would be a deep downrigger, would have a meat rig on it. Typically, it's going to have a larger flasher, like a Hotfish 10 or maybe even a Kingfisher. That's my downriggers. On my divers, I'm going to have a high diver, which will be a standard slide diver, and I'm going to have a deep diver, which will be a mag or an ultimate. I think they call it the ultimate slide diver. The ultimate is going to be on the opposite side of my deep diver, but it's going to be my deep rigger, but it's going to be a deep diver, and that's going to be meat or anchovy. And then the high diver is going to have a fly on it. And then the 2 long lines are typically going to be lead cores and weighted steel. And typically what I'll do is the lead core will have a spoon and the weighted steel will have a fly. And I'm trying to find it right now. And I tell you, on my weighted steel, and it's typically my 200 or my 250, it's this paddle right here. It's a chrome Pro Troll with it's got UV crush and green dots. Either the Pro Troll, or if I get, sometimes I use a Pro King if I can't get the Pro Troll blanks. And I will use a Hotfish. I think it's a Hotfish Nemesis or North Shore Special Fly, and that is my go-to. 2, 2, and 2, bit of some variety out there. That being said, and I talked about this a bit earlier, I'll change it up, right? So as the bite starts to slow and I feel like the fish are getting more spooky, that's where I'll pull a rigger and I'll put a shoot rod out, or I will I may even pull both riggers and put 2 more long lines out. Just because we have downriggers doesn't mean we have to use them all the time. Like that's the one thing I will absolutely tell you. I know we love downriggers. I know they're easy, but if they're not working for you and other rods are working for you, switch them out. Get rid of the downriggers. Like in the spring, there's days we never even look at a downrigger, like because they're even though they're on the boat. So that'd be my advice. But yeah, 6-rod spread. It's usually 2, 2, and 2 to start, and then see what's working, and I start changing out. I've got the one thing I got to say about being a charter guy. The downside is we actually don't get to fish that much ourselves because we're actually doing it. We're helping other people fish all the time. But the other thing I would say is, we do get the luxury of having lots of rods out there, so we can run big spreads. So often, typically the smallest spread I have is, I priced myself where, typically my smallest trip is 3 people, and then, there's an increase for number 4, an increase for number 5. So I get a lot of 3 person as my smallest group. And that allows me to have their 6 rods, because I'm on the Canadian side, plus my 2, and have 8 rods. And 8, if you can't get it done with an 8-rod spread, you're probably in trouble. But then, when I start to get 4 people, then I'll put a 9th or even a 10th rod out. I don't go much beyond that. Like, even though when I get a 5 person, I can run 12. I don't do that when I'm on my own. I will have to have a mate with me at that point. And typically the only person that mates with me is my father, because the one thing I think is a bit misunderstood at times is your mate does have to have certain Transport Canada courses to actually mate on the boat. They don't have to have full courses, but they have to have some of them. My dad's a fully licensed captain, so for me, I'll have him out on the boat because it's completely legitimate to have both of us. We're both licensed captains, so he'll come do it with me sometimes. But now he's got his he's got the second boat, King's Landing 2. That's a big Trojan 11 meter, almost. I think it's an LOA of like 40 feet. So he's got the aircraft carrier, we call it, that he goes fishing with his buddies now. So he doesn't want to mate with me. So, anyways, that's that. Let's see if there's any more questions here before I forget. Okay, let's see. I talked about the search routine after a big blow. I talked about that one. The only here's a question I get, and it's can you run a spoon with a fly, or do you run a spoon with a fly? The answer is yes and yes. Yes, you can. You can do anything, and you should. Like, don't be afraid to put a spoon with a fly. That's another West Coast tip. So very few people run a spoon with their flasher. Out west, it is very, very, very common. Some of you guys, there's a Facebook group I'm on called Hardcore Salmon Fishing. Plug for them. It's a great group. It's started by a guy called CJ out of Vancouver. And so you get to see a lot of the West Coast tactics. And they will all use flies with flashers all the time. And they catch a lot of fish. So you can absolutely do it. I do it. The only downside is you're tugging the flasher, right? So if the fish are abundant and I don't need to run a flasher with a spoon, I won't, because then it's more of a mono on mono, like, no extra gear, better fight for the customer or for yourself. But you can run a flasher with a spoon. As I was mentioning earlier, I was showing you guys this. This is one of my coho rigs. Like, this is an orange spin doctor. And I can't even recall what I got for a leader here. So let's unravel it. It's not too short, but there you go. It's an orange spin doctor, chrome back. It's got an almost, actually, it's pretty much an arm. It's pretty much an arm and a bit of lead. There you go. And I'm running a coho killer. But I could run that with a standard spoon also, no problem. So that'd be one of my last tips, I would say. So we're an hour and 40 minutes in. So what I would say now is a big thank you to everyone for joining today. I did talk about a bunch of prizes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to go through now and figure out all the people that asked questions. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them all into like a random generator, and I will I'm going to put them through a random generator, and I'll pick out the various winners. And then what I'll do is I'll do another video, and I'll basically announce the winners there, so people know who actually won. So I would, shameless plug, I would recommend subscribing to the channel, because that way you'll get notified of my video. But I probably need a couple of days just to put that video together and get the winners all picked out, and then from there, then you guys can notify me, and we can figure out how we get those prizes to you. So that's the first thing. Second thing, as I mentioned just here, this is great. I love doing these seminars. Happy to share knowledge and tips, and learn a lot from you guys as well. What I would say is I did want to put an offer out here. So if anyone does want to book an instructional charter, so I have no problem doing that. I know I've even seen a few names here that I know have already booked me or gone out before. I know John mentioned, I went out with John last year. He booked me for an instructional charter. Happy to do that. I did want to put out a special coupon code related to this seminar. So if you do go to my site and you want to book me, feel free. You can book me using the code seminar02, and it will give you 10% off any one of my charters. And that's valid until April 1st, and then at that point the code will expire. But it's been a blast. It's been a blast doing this. Lots of fun. And please keep asking the questions of me when you watch my videos. They give me ideas on other videos to do, and don't be shy throughout the season, especially if you're a Lake Ontario guy. Because it's all about sharing and helping each other. I'm happy to share. You guys know I put videos out all the time with my reports, but please let me know how you're doing. Let me know what was working for you. If you're in a different part of the lake, because it allows me to also share that information through the videos with others. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of the winter. For those of you that spring fish, April won't be too far away. I won't be having my boat in the water this April, because I'm actually redoing the epoxy barrier on the boat and bottom coating it. So I got to wait for the weather to warm up into May before I can do that. So I probably won't be in the water till about June 1st, because it's important to take care of that boat maintenance. But I'm sure I'll sneak out with some friends and such, and if I do, I'll share that. But be safe, folks. It's only a few months away. We'll talk to you all later. Have a great one. Bye, guys.